I'm bringing 10 coworkers home now, so get ready for the after party, okay? I know you're in your last month of pregnancy, but you can handle that, right? Some women are coming, so make sure you have some desserts that women would like. My body, now in the final month of pregnancy, was at its limit from raising 2-year-old twins. My husband was indifferent to childcare and firmly believed that raising children and housework were a woman's job. When I refused because it was too sudden, my husband got mad, saying I shouldn't embarrass him in front of his coworkers. I had no choice but to prepare, and then I lied down in the kids' room to put the twins to sleep. 5 hours later, one of the drunk coworkers accidentally entered the kids' room and was shocked. I didn't know there were little kids and a pregnant wife here. Did you trick us? The coworker raised his fist towards my husband. After that, with one word from my husband, the fun after party turned into a chaotic scene. I married my current husband when I was 28. It was a whirlwind romance, and we got married within a few months of dating, so I couldn't quit my job immediately. I promised my husband I would hand over my work and quit when I found out I was pregnant. My husband originally wanted me to become a homemaker and take care of the household. However, we didn't consciously try to have children and enjoyed a typical newlywed life for about a year. Just before I turned 30, I found out I was pregnant, and as promised, I quit my job and became a homemaker. When my husband found out I was pregnant with twins, he was very excited about becoming a father to 2 children at once. He was so excited that he told everyone about how our family was going to become more lively with 2 new members. Since it was my first delivery and I was having twins, I was advised to be admitted for observation in case of any emergencies. My husband agreed that it was better to be safe than sorry, so he supported my admission to the hospital. However, I was worried about the house during my hospital stay. This was because my husband was almost completely incapable of doing housework. That concern was resolved by a suggestion from my in-laws. My mother-in-law would either come regularly to take care of my husband, or he would commute from their house. My husband chose to stay with his parents until I returned after giving birth. Later, I safely gave birth to the twins via C-section. When I was discharged, my husband, in-laws, and even my parents came, making it a grand departure. The nurse who saw us off even said, "You have such a happy family," because we looked so happy together. However, once we got home, my husband's attitude changed completely. It was nice to be back in my childhood home, but my mom was nagging me all the time. "Our home is the best. Hey, make me some coffee." What? I thought my in-laws and parents would come to our house too, but they oddly suggested we enjoy some family time alone since it had been a while. My in-laws went back to their house, and my parents returned to their hotel. Then my husband shoved his luggage at me and complained, saying his shoulders were stiff. At least he was holding one of the twins, which was a small relief. But once we got home, he placed the baby on the nearest sofa, leaned back, and said, "Coffee. Instead of worrying about your coffee, how about setting up a place for the baby to sleep?" I arranged a place for the baby to sleep, all the while being mindful of my painful abdominal wound. This was the beginning of my husband's complete lack of interest in parenting. The next day, my parents came to our house early in the morning. "You'll prioritize the babies over yourselves, right?" my mom said from her own experience. That was exactly true, but in reality, I was prioritizing not only the babies but also taking care of my husband over myself. Near noon, my in-laws arrived. Seeing my mom already doing a lot, they realized taking care of twins was more challenging than they had imagined. From that day, childcare started with the help of my in-laws and my parents. Both my father-in-law and my dad were still working, so neither my mother-in-law nor my mom could prioritize the twins all the time. Also, my parents lived out of state, so they couldn't come to help frequently, making it clear we would have to rely on my in-laws. My in-laws adored the twins and didn't criticize my inexperience, teaching me to take things slowly and not to rush. They also said that now was the time for me to learn what it means to be a mother and that I shouldn't regret the things I couldn't do, which was very reassuring. On weekends, my mom would come from out of state to stay, and during weekdays, my mother-in-law would come to help, which was very encouraging. My father-in-law shared stories about how difficult it could be for fathers to get involved in childcare at first, but once they take the first step, it becomes enjoyable. These stories started because my husband was reluctant to get involved in childcare, likely due to embarrassment or fear of failure. My dad also shared how nervous he was the first time he took me out as a baby. However, despite hearing these stories from my father-in-law and my dad, my husband showed no interest, only saying, "Oh really?" or "That's interesting." Moreover, his selfish behavior when my parents weren't around finally broke my in-laws' patience. My husband complained about being hungry and asked when dinner would be ready while I was breastfeeding the twins. He even said he was tired of ready-made meals and demanded proper home-cooked food, insisting that I should do it since I'm a housewife. It wasn't as if I used ready-made meals all the time, but to him, even one ready-made dish was unacceptable. To him, using ready-made food equated to slacking off in cooking and, by extension, neglecting housework. You're not a child, so if you're hungry, make your own food. Babies can't make and eat food by themselves. You can feed the baby with formula, can't you? Why don't you offer to feed them in exchange for a meal? My husband was initially shocked, not expecting to be scolded by his parents. If I cook, then what would a housewife do? And if I feed the baby, then what would the mother do? My in-laws and I simultaneously responded with a "huh?" After that, my mother-in-law began her machine gun-like lectures, and my father-in-law started teaching him basic childcare tasks that even a father could do. My husband reluctantly had to help and sulked the entire time. For the next 2 years, until I got pregnant with our third child, he would leave the house using work as an excuse to avoid being forced into childcare in front of my parents. But with his parents, no excuses worked, so he participated in childcare, sulking the whole time. With my second pregnancy, I experienced strong early symptoms again and suffered from severe morning sickness. Even my husband couldn't ask me to do various things when I was clearly feeling unwell, so he willingly did the housework and childcare. His willingness to do housework was also thanks to the re-education by his parents. However, little by little, he started finding reasons not to do it. The last straw was that the seasoning of the meal he made was not great. Everyone makes mistakes, and I appreciated his effort, so I tried to eat as much as I could despite my lack of appetite. But because I was feeling unwell, I couldn't finish the meal. He interpreted my inability to finish it as a silent complaint that it was inedible. He began to think that making an effort was pointless, and started to feel that spending his time on it was a waste. Once he started to slack off, it gradually became a hassle, and his dedicated attitude didn't even last a month. Now, he naturally enjoys his hobbies on weekends, and on weekdays, he comes home late, saying it's due to work or social obligations. Some days, I would end my day without even seeing my husband. Still, I asked him to come home a bit earlier or to be home on at least one of the weekend days. He didn't need to take care of me, just spending time with the twins would be enough. You've been raising the kids for 2 years, so you should be used to it by now. And it's your second delivery, and only one baby this time. There's nothing I can do to help. Saying that, he went out to enjoy his hobbies. Recently, our 2-year-old twins had become sensitive to the way my husband and I acted. They seemed to sense something unusual from his tone and my expressions, and when one started crying, the other would follow. I unconsciously let out a sigh of disappointment. Why did I end up getting pregnant with a third child in this situation? I couldn't help but question myself. One thing I can say is that even though he was uncooperative with childcare, he occasionally showed me kindness. When he sought physical intimacy, I felt reassured that he hadn't lost interest in me yet, and I went along with it because refusing might upset him and cause me trouble. Looking back, it seems like a vicious cycle. It's not that I disliked the baby inside me. The truth is, I was happy to be pregnant. But deep down, I felt like it wasn't the right time. Still, as my belly grew and the baby moved, I felt a deep affection. I rubbed my growing belly and spoke to the baby, saying, "I'm sorry for being a weak mom, but I'll become stronger, so please be born healthy." After a while, it was decided that this delivery would also be a C-section. I was scheduled to be admitted to the hospital on my due date, with preparations to be made beforehand. Most importantly, I needed my husband's help to take care of the twins while I was in the hospital. I couldn't ask him to take time off work, but I asked if he could at least help during the nights. But he said there were no guarantees with his work and that he couldn't make such a promise. It's so embarrassing for a man to take time off for his wife's delivery. It makes me look like a henpecked husband. What? I was at my limit and about to retort when he interrupted me with, "Hey, where's my food? Enough of that talk, don't bring it up again." I'm sure a 2-year-old would eat by themselves when they're hungry. Oh really? Then a man over 30 should be able to eat on his own better than a 2-year-old. Why don't you show the kids how it's done? I'm fine. You all live off my earnings, so you should show your gratitude by making me food, got it? What he's saying is absurd. As my belly grew larger, it put pressure on my back, slowing down everything I did. My husband criticized my housework more harshly, calling me slow and unmotivated. His favorite phrase lately has been, "I'm the one providing for you." Providing for me? I wanted to work too, but he's the one who insisted that women should stay at home and demanded I become a housewife once I got pregnant. Of course, I chose to give in to his demands, but still, how dare he say he's providing for me? However, as I entered the 36th week of pregnancy, my movement slowed even more, and his words became harsher. His complete lack of consideration made me furious, but I couldn't say anything back, fearing it might lead to physical harm. I suppressed my urge to argue and endured his heartless words. Finally, the scheduled C-section at 38 weeks was approaching. You should reconsider the C-section. Last time it was twins, so it couldn't be helped, but this time it's just one baby. Wouldn't a natural birth give you more of a sense of accomplishment? My husband doesn't understand anything. Giving birth is a life-threatening act. My husband's opinions and fixations don't matter. With a C-section, you get admitted earlier and stay longer. So basically, you want a C-section to avoid housework, right? How can anyone think that wanting to avoid housework leads to a C-section? It's a completely baffling statement. Still, I patiently explained the risks to the mother and baby, trying to get him to understand. If my explanation wasn't clear, we could ask the doctor to explain it. But my husband didn't listen at all. You're bad at explaining. So why should I waste my time listening to an explanation about a C-section? It's you who's giving birth, not me. I was explaining why a C-section was necessary because he assumed I wanted it to avoid work. Yet he dismissed it, saying it didn't concern him, and ended the conversation. On the day of admission, I made an effort to gain my husband's understanding to avoid him preventing the procedure. But he just got angry and accused me of being persistent, ending the conversation. Amidst all this, I received a rare phone call from my husband. He told me they were having an after-party at our place and that I should prepare food for 10 of his coworkers. He also said there would be women among them, so I should prepare some desserts that women would like. Before the kids were born, there was a time when my husband often brought his coworkers home for drinks. During that time, I got to hear about a side of my husband I didn't know, and we enjoyed sharing pleasant moments together, even though they were his coworkers. After I got pregnant, the frequency of their visits gradually decreased. Especially after the twins were born, they haven't come over at all. According to my husband, he invited them, but they refrained from coming because of the twins. It seems that his coworkers were hesitant to have a party at a house with young twins. In short, they were being considerate. The twins are still 2 years old and require constant attention. I can't understand why such considerate coworkers would decide to come in a group of 10 today of all days. I'm about to be admitted to the hospital, and I could go into labor at any moment. In such a state, it's impossible for me to prepare food to entertain guests. If my husband had told me in advance, maybe, but not in my current condition. It's just not possible. I asked him to have the after party at another place, even if it meant going over budget. My husband often generously treats his coworkers and juniors. You could say he's just showing off. In the past, he has spent tens of thousands of dollars on drinks in a single day. I politely asked him not to bring them home this time, even if it meant spending that much again, but my husband got angry. I already told them we're having it at our place. Do you want to embarrass me in front of my colleagues? He insisted that as a wife, I should uphold his honor and just follow his orders, saying I should cook and host them. I no longer had the energy to argue and felt it would be more peaceful to just do as he said. I told him it was impossible to go shopping now and that I'd have to make do with what we had, and then I prepared food for 10 people. I was glad I had bought a little extra food just in case I couldn't go shopping suddenly. But using it all up tonight meant I'd have to go shopping again tomorrow. I wondered if I'd be able to go tomorrow. While cooking, I felt my stomach tightening. My husband also told me to hide in a room with the twins and keep quiet once everything was ready. I did as I was told. As I started putting the twins to sleep, my husband came home with 10 coworkers. The noise woke up the twins, but I quietly asked them to stay calm and tried to get them back to sleep. Watching the twins fall asleep, I felt relieved. Once I felt relieved, I started to notice the pain in my stomach. I almost let out a sound but covered my mouth with both hands and stayed hidden. But the pain in my stomach grew stronger and more distinct. I realized this might be a serious situation. Just as I felt that way, the door to the room suddenly opened. Sorry, I thought this was the bathroom, huh? It seemed he was drunk and mistook the room for the bathroom. But in the room were the sleeping twins and a pregnant woman. Moreover, I was trying to endure the pain and let out a faint groan. I tried to cover it up and told him not to worry and to enjoy himself. He was someone who used to come over to drink often, so we knew each other. Don't worry, you say. The coworker, at a loss for words, left the room, leaving me and the twins behind. From the living room, I heard the angry voice of the coworker who had just left. Hey, what are you doing leaving your little kids and wife alone? And your wife is pregnant. With her belly that big, isn't it almost time? What? What's going on? I thought they came knowing the situation to some extent. I wondered why they suddenly changed their considerate behavior, but maybe they joked about it while drinking, and my husband took it seriously. Once he agreed, he couldn't back out, and wanting to save face, my husband got angry and demanded I comply. That's what I thought had happened. But from what I overheard of the coworkers' conversation, that wasn't the case at all. The coworker was still refusing to go to a house with small children. So my husband had been persistently inviting coworkers to our house, even though they kept refusing. The coworker expressed regret, saying it was one thing to visit during the day, but coming to a house with children and a pregnant woman this late at night was out of line. So how did it end up like this? The coworker explained it like this. My husband told them that the kids and I were staying at my parents' house, so there was no need to be considerate. Believing those words, 10 coworkers came to our house for the after party. Damn, I told you to hide so they wouldn't see you. Well, if they did, it can't be helped. She keeps using excuses like taking care of the twins, being pregnant, or being close to delivery to slack off on housework, so I made her cook for 10 people at once. Considering how much she's been slacking off, it's still not enough. My husband spoke with a confident tone as if what he did was right. You made her cook? For 10 people, at this hour? Hearing the unusual tone, I got worried and left the room. I didn't know what my enraged husband might do. Some people are tyrants at home but act like reasonable individuals in public. I can't say for sure my husband is that type, but knowing how he is at home, I wasn't sure what he might do now. When I peeked into the living room, I saw a coworker grabbing my husband by the collar. The other coworkers, though drunk, were trying to calm down the one who grabbed my husband's collar, saying it was too much. But the still angry coworker explained why he couldn't calm down. And the coworkers who had been defending my husband began to look at him with suspicion. Some coworkers with children the same age as our twins couldn't believe it and looked at my husband with contempt. Female coworkers expressed that, thinking from my perspective, it was unforgivable, calling him a terrible husband. There were calls to end the party immediately, and some coworkers started to clean up. When coworkers called him the worst as both a husband and a father, my husband shrank from his usual arrogance and couldn't say anything in response. A few coworkers noticed me and apologized, bowing their heads. When I moved to a nearby sofa to rest, I realized the pain in my stomach was becoming regular. Realizing it was definitely labor, I asked my husband, who was still cowering from the coworkers' scolding, for help. But there was no response. A coworker noticed and asked if I needed to call the hospital. When I nodded, he handed me the phone. I called the hospital, and they told me to come immediately, so I decided to go. The necessary items for my hospital stay were prepared in the bedroom. As I tried to get up to fetch them, a female coworker offered to get them if I allowed her to enter the bedroom since my husband remained unresponsive. Honestly, I couldn't believe I was going into labor at such a time. My husband was useless, probably because he was demoralized, and I wondered if it was appropriate to ask my in-laws to come over and take care of the twins at this hour. How many times had I wished we lived closer to my parents? I could have relied on my own parents without hesitation. If you're going, go by yourself. If you call an ambulance, tell them not to use the siren. It would be embarrassing if the neighbors found out. Besides, it's your fault the party was ruined, so take responsibility for it. The party was ruined because my husband's lie was exposed. I did as my worthless husband said and stayed quietly in the room. Lies are always exposed eventually. Especially men's lies, which are often too careless. It was his own fault, yet he blames me? I wanted to tell him off, but I felt my body wouldn't handle the stress if I let my anger out. As I held back my words, I heard the sound of something being hit. Looking in the direction of the sound, I saw a coworker who I was familiar with slap my husband. I never thought you'd be such a rotten person. Giving birth is a life and death matter. Did you just hit me? Not even my parents have hit me before. Huh? I've heard a similar line somewhere before. I was astonished that someone would actually say something like that in real life. His face turned bright red, probably because his pride was severely hurt and he felt humiliated. His ears turned red too, making it clear he felt greatly humiliated. I'm sorry for expecting someone who doesn't know pain to have empathy. Listen, the pain your wife went through is nothing like this. Why am I the only one being blamed? I'm not wrong. I'm the one providing for them. My husband claimed that it was my fault for embarrassing him in front of others, and that he wasn't at fault at all. He also shouted at the coworker who slapped him, threatening to sue for violence. None of the coworkers were listening to him anymore. Some even said he could sue them if he wanted to and asked me what they could do to help. With all the commotion, the twins woke up. Hearing the raised voices of unfamiliar adults scared them, and they started crying loudly. I was overwhelmed with my own situation and honestly annoyed that I also had to take care of the twins. I didn't need a useless husband who prioritized his pride even in such a situation. Just as I was about to ask my in-laws for help, a female coworker and a male coworker with kids offered to take care of the twins. I grasped at the offer like a lifeline and accepted their help. The woman said she often took care of her nieces and nephews, and the man said his kids were the same age as the twins. I told them there were plenty of toys in the twins' room and that they could use any food in the house since the twins had no allergies. I also mentioned that my mother-in-law was supposed to come in the morning, but I would contact her to come earlier. Some coworkers who had experienced their wives' deliveries suggested that taking a taxi would be faster. They called for a taxi, but it would take a while as they were all out. Then one of the coworkers mentioned they had a subordinate living nearby and called them. It was a coworkers-only gathering tonight, so subordinates hadn't joined. Upon hearing the situation, the subordinate rushed over. That subordinate was also a father of young children, and when he explained the situation to his wife, she told him not to waste time explaining and to hurry over. It might have been a made-up story, but I appreciated his effort to make me feel less concerned. My husband kept insisting on his own righteousness, but the coworkers and I completely ignored him. The subordinate drove me to the hospital, and the female coworker who accompanied me got out of the car with me and said she would stay until my in-laws or parents arrived. She even contacted my parents and in-laws on my behalf, for which I was very grateful for. I told her she had done enough and could go home now, but she insisted it was fine and stayed with me until my in-laws arrived. My parents, who lived out of state, arrived the next morning. They didn't make it in time for the C-section, but they were relieved to hear that both mother and baby were safe. The real chaos began once things had settled down. First, my in-laws and my parents suspected my husband of cheating when they learned the woman who called was his coworker. They were curious about the situation where a supposed mistress would call, but they decided it was more important to rush to the hospital. When they arrived at the hospital and learned more details, they were shocked to find out it was far beyond just discovering an affair. Seeing that my husband wasn't at the hospital, my in-laws assumed he was taking care of the twins. They were somewhat relieved, thinking that although he was a terrible husband, at least he was fulfilling his duties as a father by taking care of the kids, even if a supposed mistress was accompanying me. But in reality, he made coworkers take care of the twins and had me, who was about to give birth, cook for 10 people. My in-laws apologized to me and my parents for my husband's behavior, while he sulked, insisting he did nothing wrong. My in-laws said I'd feel more comfortable with my own parents there and hurried home to confront my husband. They were apparently appalled by what they saw when they arrived. Of my husband's 10 coworkers, all except the 2 who offered to take care of the twins had already gone home. While they busily took care of the twins and cleaned up after the party, my husband sulked in the corner of the room, drinking a can of beer. My mother-in-law gave the remaining 2 coworkers taxi fare and a small token of appreciation, and she asked if she could properly apologize and thank them later for this incident. She didn't think money would solve anything. But at that moment, it was the only way she could immediately show gratitude and apologize. Later, my in-laws apologized and thanked all 10 of my husband's coworkers. When it was just my husband, his parents, and the twins, my mother-in-law took the twins out for a walk. She probably didn't want the kids to see their father being scolded. When she returned with the twins after a while, my husband's cheek was more swollen, indicating he had received a hard slap from his father. My husband, thoroughly chastised by his father, had a defeated and empty look on his face. Even after all that, he still insisted he did nothing wrong. By the time I returned home with our 3rd child, my husband hadn't shown any sign of remorse. In front of his parents, he would at least do what he was told. Being hit by his father had quite an impact on him, but as soon as his parents left, he reverted to his old self. He ordered me around, telling me to do this and that, even though I was busy taking care of 2-year-old twins and a newborn baby. He even started saying he was hit by his father because I was an inadequate wife, making him completely insufferable. I decided to get a divorce and told both my in-laws and my parents. My parents were fully supportive. Before I was discharged, they had actually advised me to go back to my parents' home. My in-laws also acknowledged their son's incompetence and said they had no reason to oppose my decision. My husband was the only one vehemently against the divorce and didn't agree to it immediately. He apparently consulted his coworkers at the office, telling them I was pushing for a divorce. However, his coworkers found it surprising that I hadn't asked for a divorce sooner and said they supported my decision. Essentially, my husband was abandoned by his coworkers. Rumors began at his workplace about some incident happening at the after-party at our house. Although the source was unclear, several people, including my husband, were absent or late the day after the after-party. Furthermore, my in-laws went to the office to meet with the 10 people who were there and apologize. This led to speculation that my husband had done something to his coworkers. People at the office started speculating about what he had done since his parents were bowing an apology. Amid all this, news of my safe delivery spread among the 10 coworkers who attended the after-party. Gossiping employees began to speculate that my husband might have messed up during my childbirth. The rumor, though not entirely accurate, had spread, and my husband was looked down upon by not only his coworkers but also his subordinates. Eventually, his work failures became more noticeable, and feeling uncomfortable, he resigned voluntarily. It was only then that he realized the gravity of what he had done. At first, he reluctantly agreed to the divorce in a fit of anger, but after quitting his job and moving back to his parents' house, he found no peace of mind. He tearfully pleaded with me to reconsider, saying that our home had been his oasis. However, I had already given up the house we lived in. I had returned to my parents' home and was raising my children with their help. I had no time to spare for a man I had already discarded. Later, my husband couldn't find a new job by the deadline and was kicked out of his parents' house. Kicked out without a penny, my husband was forced into a situation where he couldn't be picky about jobs as the deadline for child support and alimony payments approached. He took a quick loan from a shady place to make the payments, resulting in a life of being chased by debt collectors. Now, he works tough jobs run by the same shady lenders, earning daily wages that are immediately confiscated for repayments. I moved back to my parents' house, but I still stay in touch with my in-laws and my ex-husband's former coworkers. It all started when the twins said they wanted to see the older sisters and brothers who played with them, so I reached out on a whim. At the time, I wondered why my husband's coworkers would come to an after-party in such circumstances, but everyone except my husband turned out to be very reasonable people. I'm grateful to those 10 for the happiness I have now. I've even started having family gatherings with those who have families. We share our parenting worries and have become a strong support for each other. My in-laws have been very kind, and the twins have grown attached to them. The relationship between my in-laws and my parents is also good, so they regularly visit to see the twins and their new grandchild. This whole experience has made me realize that life is built on mutual support between people. Never forgetting the gratitude I felt back then, I aim to become even happier now. Together with my precious family.